December 16, 1944. The German army launches its last major offensive on the Western Front, hoping to obtain a victory over the Americans and British, which will give them the necessary pause to contain the Soviets. For the new operation, the Germans managed to gather most of their elite divisions, among which the Leibstandard, Hitlerjugend, Panzerlehr, Hohenstaufen, and Das Reich divisions stand out. Next in this program, we will analyze the performance of the Das Reich division during the Battle of the Bulge. The Das Reich division, grouped within General Joseph Dietrich's 6th SS Panzer Army, was left in reserve when the Germans attacked on December 16. According to the plan dictated by Hitler, the mission of the 6th SS Panzer Army would be to reach the port city of Antwerp. Further south, General Manschaufel's 5th Panzer Army would have to reach Brussels, thus defending the left flank of the German advance. Finally, General Brandenberger's 7th Army would cover the southern flank, where Patton's 3rd Army was expected to counterattack. When the German offensive began, the Das Reich division had a total of 150 tanks, including 58 Panthers, and some 17,000 infantry troops. Considering that it had been practically annihilated during the recent Battle of Normandy, Das Reich was in a very good situation. Because the task of breaking the first American defensive line was assigned to the Leibstandard and Hitlerjugend divisions, the Das Reich division remained in the rear, awaiting orders to join the attack. As expected, this order would come after the breakup of the U.S. defensive line. In this way, Das Reich would sneak into the open gap and advance at full speed towards the city of Antwerp. However, unfortunately for the Germans, nothing went as planned. By December 19, 3 days after the start of the offensive, the vanguard of the Leibstandard division, represented by the famous Kampfgruppe paper, was blocked between Staumont and La Gleize. For Marshal Model, it was clear that the offensive had failed. However, because the German leader continued to insist that they had to continue attacking, Walter Model was forced to order the Das Reich division into action. During the night of the 19th and the early hours of the 20th of December, the Das Reich division abandoned its rear positions near the town of Lochie-Mergraben and headed towards the town of St. Vith, where the Americans were still resisting. After traveling about 40 kilometers, the Reich division was located south of St. Vith on December 21. They were then ordered to continue west towards the city of Houffalize. During this journey, many of their battle tanks, trucks, and vehicles of all types were left stranded on the road due to lack of fuel. At this point, the main objective for the Germans was to cross the Meuse River through any sector they could reach. It being clear that neither the Leibstandard division nor Hitlerjugend were going to be able to advance on the right flank of the German wedge, the German attack was redirected towards the central sector, where the 5th Panzer Army was. In this way, the new sector through which the crossing of the Meuse was established was the one close to the city of Dinant, and the Das Reich division was redirected there. As a curiosity, it was in Dinant where Rommel crossed the Meuse in 1940 with his 7th Panzer Division. Since the Americans were still holding out in St. Vith, Das Reich was assigned the mission of cutting off the retreat of enemy troops that were retreating west from St. Vith. On the night of the 21st, the fuel supply trucks arrived at the Das Reich position, 15 kilometers from Houffalize, and their panzers were resupplied. The city of St. Vith ended up falling under German control that same day, while the Das Reich resupplied further south. Once they had gasoline in their tanks again, the elite division's armored vehicles resumed their march in the direction of Manhay, between the cities of Houffalize and St. Vith. From here on, the resistance they encountered from the American troops increased. By the night of the 22nd, the unit received orders to redirect north to cut off the retreat of the Americans retreating west from St. Vith. The pincer on the rear of St. Vith in Somme-Château was completed by Otto Riemer's Führerbegleitbrigade Brigade closing in the north on the night of the 23rd. While the Kampfgruppe Krag of the Das Reich division attacked Somme-Château in a northerly direction, the Deutschland Regiment and the Der Führer Regiment continued westwards with the aim of taking the important road junction of Barak to Freicher, a few kilometers from Manhay. After two failed attacks by the 1st and 2nd Battalions of the Der Führer Regiment, they finally took the position with the help of a group of 8 Panzer IV of the division, led by Lieutenant Grisiak, destroying several American armored vehicles. This action earned him the Knight's Cross. From here, both the Das Reich and the Hohenstaufen Division, which was on its right, were ordered to advance northwest to the Meuse to cross it between Namur and Huy, about 50 kilometers from there. One of the American divisions in that sector was Gavin's 82nd Airborne, which was overextended trying to slow the German advance. On the other hand, the area near Manhay was unprotected, and on the 24th the 7th Armored Division was ordered to go there to organize a defense. Once again, Das Reich was limited by a shortage of gasoline, which was being diverted to the Panzer Lehr and the 2nd Panzer Division that were near Celles, being the German spearhead in the Ardennes. The Americans were aware of this German problem, and ordered their men not to let their gasoline fall into German hands under any circumstances. During the early hours of December 24th, the Das Reich Division began approaching Manhay from the southeast, and the division commanders planned the attack through the villages of Odain and Oster. The first German assault was carried out by the 1st Company of the Deutschland Regiment, and was stopped short because the Americans had reinforced the sector very well, and although they also suffered losses, they managed to maintain their positions during the 24th. Since the sky was clearing, and the Germans knew that the Allied fighter bombers would soon appear, they decided to return to the forest near Barak. For its part, the Hohenstaufen Division, which was supposed to appear to support the attack northeast of Manhay, finally did not appear, so Das Reich decided to deviate a little further to its right, towards Molemper, to protect its flank. It should be noted that the Hohenstaufen had been slowed down by the 82nd Airborne, which had blown up a couple of vital bridges on its way to Manhay. As the Germans reorganized, Montgomery, who had assumed command of forces north of the German penetration, gave the order for a general withdrawal, which involved establishing positions north of Manhay. By 2200 hours on December 24th, Wettinger's men from the Der Führer Regiment began their attack on Manhay through Molemper. In a few hours, his men managed to inflict a total defeat on the Americans of the 7th Armored Division, which practically ceased to exist. During that night, the veteran Panther commander Barkman managed to completely surprise the Americans, mixing with them, unleashing panic among the American ranks inside the city of Manhay. In this action, she is credited with the destruction of at least 7 Shermans, and his companion Franz Fauschers with the destruction of another 9. In total, the Americans lost 32 tanks that night. Next, once they secured Manhay, the Germans continued to advance towards Grandmesnil. However, shortly after beginning to advance westward, and passing the small town of Grandmesnil, dawn began to dawn and the Germans had to paralyze their advance because they would be at the mercy of Allied aviation. It is estimated that the Das Reich Division lost at least 4 Panthers due to mines that the Americans had placed between Manhay and Grandmesnil. With the Germans now on the defensive, occupying both cities, the Americans counterattacked throughout the day on December 25th, boasting complete air superiority. However, due to the confusion, some of the columns of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division, which had just arrived in the sector, were attacked by their own aircraft. The first Allied attack against Manhay ended in failure due to the stiff resistance put up by the men of the Der Führer Regiment, who had been ordered to hold the position at all costs. Thus, as they could not take the city by assault, the Americans began to bombard Manhay and Grandmesnil during the afternoon of the 25th, using both their land artillery and their aviation, which in a few hours devastated both cities. This bombardment was very forceful because it is estimated that the 7th Armored Division had lost about 35% of its personnel during its failed assault, and with the enormous bombardment they sought revenge. However, and despite everything, by the night of December 25th, both towns continued to be under German control. During that night, the Das Reich Division received the order to attack towards the town of Mormont, but it was practically impossible for them to carry out this new mission. The division was exhausted and had suffered many losses. They had a lack of fuel. The sky was dominated by Allied aviation and any daytime movement was restricted. And finally, the Hohenstaufen Division was not covering their right flank, and if they advanced, they would be very exposed. But, despite everything, the men of General Lammerding, commander of the Das Reich, had to attack. On the morning of the 26th, Das Reich launched a small attack towards the north of Manhay that scratched a few more meters of ground. Additionally, a column of at least 12 Panthers left for Mormont that morning. The advance was stopped by strong American resistance, which had blocked all roads with fallen trees and other obstacles, which managed to definitively stop the Das Reich advance. The Americans then continued their counterattack against Manhay and Grandemennel, but were again stopped by the few Panthers that Das Reich still had there. Since attacking the Germans during the day was impossible, because they had to cross a clear field, the Americans decided to assault the German defensive positions during the night of the 26th and the early hours of the 27th. At around 4 o'clock hours, they managed to expel the Germans from the town, who had to retreat towards Ardennes. It is estimated that they lost about 10 Panthers between Manhay and Grandemennel during the withdrawal, in the early hours of December 27th. Late at night, General Lammerding was told that the Hohenstaufen and the Hitlerjugend were about to arrive, and that together they would launch another attack towards Erezee. Traffic jams, the presence of enemy aircraft and the lack of fuel greatly delayed the march of these units towards their new starting positions. After many efforts, the Hitlerjugend attack could finally be carried out, and on the morning of the 28th they took Briskel, very close to Erezee. However, on this occasion, the weak attack of the Das Reich failed, as it barely managed to advance through its sector. Finally, the Germans were staked out due to the heavy bombardment they were suffering from both artillery and aviation, their shortage of material and fuel, and the defense put up by the Americans. By the afternoon of December 29th, Model ordered a defensive move in that sector, aware that it was impossible to continue advancing. Only the Das Reich Division was going to remain there, while the Hohenstaufen and the Hitlerjugend were going to be sent further south to the area of the 5th Panzer Army in Bastogne. Days later, due to strong Allied pressure along the entire German salient in the Ardennes, Das Reich would be forced to retreat towards Germany, also because in mid-January it was assigned a new mission in Hungary, which would be known as Operation Spring Awakening. Finally, and as a curiosity, today you can visit this sector, where there is one of the Das Reich Panthers, belonging to the unit's 2nd Regiment.